This was not a land for the soft. The year was 1867, and the Arizona Territory was a fresh wound, raw and red. The wind owned this place. It was a high, thin scream that came down from the mesas, carrying sand that felt like powdered glass. It scoured the paint from the few plank buildings of the outposts and stole the breath from a man's lungs. The war between the states had ended 2 years prior, but the men it had spat out were still rolling west. They were ex-soldiers from both the blue and the gray, men who had learned to speak only with the percussion of a rifle. They mingled with the prospectors chasing copper rumors, the bounty hunters who tracked men for less than $50, and the last of the mountain men, their buckskins smelling of animals that no longer roamed these parts. It was a place defined by what it lacked: water, trees, law. At night, the crushing heat fled the land, leaving a cold so profound it felt like a physical weight. The sky was an explosion of stars, bright and indifferent. This was the landscape red rock canyons carved by forgotten floods, sprawling alkali flats, and the occasional, lonely fort, its wooden walls a desperate barrier against the emptiness. The newly laid railroad tracks were a thin, arrogant scar on the earth, and the telegraph poles, strung with humming wire, seemed a fragile, foolish defiance. Into this land came Claire Whitlock. She was 25 years old, which by St. Louis standards made her a spinster, but out here, it just made her a target. She was not a target, however, she was the hunter. Claire was a reporter, though the papers back east preferred the softer term correspondent. She was also a photographer, burdened by a craft that required a mule just for the equipment. She hauled the heavy wooden box, the collapsible tripod, the portable dark tent, and the precious, fragile glass plates. Each image was a battle against chemistry, dust, and time. She had come west not for the landscape, but for the shadows. She was tracking a story that lived in the whispers at wagon stops and the coded advertisements in the Santa Fe weeklies. They were called bride contracts, homestead companions, needle women for mining camps. Claire knew it was human trafficking. She had seen the posters, tacked to the walls of the telegraph office. Honest, hard-working women required for decent, God-fearing men, passage paid. She had also seen, from a distance, the holding pens. This was not a job for her. It was a penance. 8 years ago, on the trail to the California goldfields, her younger sister, Elodie, had died. It was not an arrow or thirst. It was malaria, a damp, clinging sickness of the lowlands, a cruel joke in the arid expanse of the West. Claire was 17 then. She had held her sister's hand while the fever did its work. Elodie had been promised in marriage to a man in Sacramento, a man she had never met, a bride contract arranged by their desperate father. Claire had failed to protect her. The integrity she now carried was not a virtue. It was a callus formed over a wound. She would not fail again. She saw Elodie's face in every exhausted, hollow-eyed woman she passed. She was setting up her tripod on a high, windy ridge overlooking the Santa Fe Trail when he first saw her. He was high above her, a shadow among the sandstone hoodoos. His name was Kai Nez. To the cavalry, he had been Red Horse, a name earned for the speed with which he could run a man down, and the blood bay he had favored. He was 28 years old, and he had already lived 2 lives. The first life had been as a Daine, a man of the people, learning the rhythms of the canyons, the songs of the changing woman. The second life had been as a scout for the United States Cavalry. He had worn the blue coat, believing, for a short, foolish time, that he could guide the soldiers, steer them away from the sacred places, and honor the treaties the white men signed with such ease and broke with such speed. He had been wrong. The long walk, the forced removal of his people to Bosque Redondo, had happened on his watch, though he had not participated. The shame of it had settled deep in his marrow. So he had quit. He had walked away from the fort, shedding the blue coat, and returned to the valley his ancestors had called home. He was tall, lean, and moved with a silence that unnerved the white men in the trading posts. A thin, pale scar cut a line from his left cheekbone to the corner of his jaw, a gift from a drunken trooper who had not liked his insolent silence. Kai had not been silent afterward. He had broken the trooper's arm in 2 places and walked away. His morals were no longer complicated. They were simple. Protect the land, protect his people, and his people were now anyone the predators hunted. He watched the white woman below. She was clumsy. She fought the wind, her skirts a liability, her heavy equipment an anchor. She was too exposed. She was focused on the valley below, her back to the high rocks. A fool. The land she was photographing, the land Kai had returned to, was the epicenter of the conflict. It was worthless for farming, but it was rich in coal, and the railroad needed coal. A man named Baron Silas Wexler, who was not a baron at all, wanted that coal. He was a creature of the East, a man of contracts and capital, who saw the West as a ledger. He had hired a private army of Pinkerton agents and ex-soldiers to pacify the region, which meant driving the Dine from their ancestral homes. Wexler was a pragmatist. He understood that the routes his men used to move guns and supplies to the mining camps were inefficiently empty on the return. He had diversified. The same men who burned Dine Hogan's also protected the wagon trains bringing women from the East. The bride contracts were his quietest, most profitable venture. He ran the shadow markets along the trail, ensuring the local law was paid. The telegraph operators lost messages, and the women were delivered. Claire Whitlock knew none of this. She only knew what she saw. She adjusted the focus on her lens, shielding it from the grit. She was trying to capture the new railroad tracks cutting through the pass. And then she saw them, far below, on a dusty side trail. A small procession moved. They were not in a wagon. They were walking, even at this distance, nearly a mile. She saw the glint of the sun on something metallic. She squinted. It was a chain. A line of 5, perhaps 6 figures, tethered to one another, led by 2 men on horseback. Her breath caught. This was it. This was the proof. She cursed the heavy tripod. She could never capture that detail from this distance. She needed to be closer. Recklessness took over. It was the same impulse that made her climb a burning building in St. Louis to get a photograph of the firemen. It was the engine of her grief. She abandoned the large format camera. She grabbed her smaller, handheld stereoscopic camera, a boxy device, and a handful of prepared glass plates, stuffing them into her satchel. She started down the treacherous scree slope, half sliding, half running, her heavy boots sending rocks clattering. Kai watched her go. He sighed, a soft exhalation of breath. The woman was moving from a position of relative safety to one of absolute danger. She was moving toward the coyotes, the men who handled Wexler's livestock. He saw the other men before she did. They had been camped in a small washout, hidden from the main trail, brewing coffee. They were not Wexler's men. They were ex-soldiers, deserters by the look of their mismatched uniforms. And they were watching the trail. Claire, focused only on the procession below, stumbled right into them. She came around a large boulder and nearly fell over a man cleaning his rifle. He looked up, his face a mask of dust and surprise, which quickly turned to a greasy appreciation. "Well, now," he drawled, getting to his feet. "Look what the wind blew in." His companion, emerging from the shadows of the overhang, grinned, showing broken yellow teeth. "Lost, little lady." Claire froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. A trapped bird. She held the stereoscopic camera to her chest like a shield. "I am not lost," she said, her voice admirably steady. "I am mapping this region for the Geological Survey." The first man chuckled. He stepped forward, blocking her path back up the hill. "The survey, huh? They usually send men, and they do not usually send them with little picture boxes." He reached for the camera. What you got in there? Do not touch that, Claire snapped, jerking it away. His eyes hardened. Feisty. From his perch, Kai watched. Two men, deserters. They were thirsty and arrogant. He knew the type. He also knew the woman had just made a fatal mistake. She had shown fear, and then she had shown defiance. A lethal combination. He remained still. He was a pragmatist. This was not his fight. She was a white woman, trespassing on Dine land, interfering with matters she did not understand. The first man grabbed her arm. Claire reacted instantly, bringing her heavy leather satchel, weighted with glass plates, swinging around. It connected with the side of the man's head with a dull, wet thud. He staggered back, roaring in surprise and pain. The second man, the one with the yellow teeth, stopped smiling. He raised his rifle, not to his shoulder, but to his hip. That is enough of that, you witch. Just tie her up, Silas. The first man grumbled, rubbing his ear. We can sell her at the next stop. She might fetch $10. Claire's blood went cold. She looked from the rifle to the man's leering face. She had Elodie's face. She opened her mouth to scream, but the wind took the sound. The high, keening wind. It filled the canyon, a physical presence, a howl of emptiness. But to Kai, it was not empty. He heard the song beneath it, the Dine song of changing woman. Asa Nadle, the song that reminded the people that all things, even this hard, broken land, would be born again. Change was a blade. Change was also medicine. The wind buffeted the man with the rifle, making him squint against the dust. It was enough. Kai Nez rose from the rocks, a shadow detaching itself from the stone, and began his descent. It was 3 days later, and the sun was a hammer. The place was called the Apache Wells Station, but there were no Apache, and the well was barely a seep of alkaline mud. It was a nexus point on the Santa Fe Trail, a collection of rotting wood shacks, canvas tents, and a long, low adobe building that served as a saloon, post office, and auction house. Today, it was an auction house. Men had gathered, miners with dust in their beards, ranchers smelling of cattle, and the quiet, watchful men in cheap suits who worked for the railroad. They were here for the shipment. Claire Whitlock was among them, and she was terrified. She had spent 2 days preparing. She had traded her sturdy reporter's trousers and boots for a drab, gray wool dress, serviceable but worn. She had pulled her hair back into a severe bun, adopting the pinched, anxious look of a homesteader's widow. She carried a small purse with $50 in paper scrip. She was, for today, Mrs. Gable, a woman looking for a companion and household help for her non-existent boarding house near the Tucson line. The air in the adobe was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale whiskey, and fear. The bride contracts were laid out on a table, but the real merchandise was lined up against the far wall. 10 women. They stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes downcast. Some were pale-faced girls from Ohio or Missouri, lured west by promises of good husbands or teaching jobs. Their contracts sold and resold until they landed here. Others, Claire noted with a tightening in her stomach, were native. A heavy-set man with a braided beard and a missing ear Boone sledge ran the proceedings. He was Vexler's man, the foreman of this human stockyard. He walked the line, poking a finger into a girl's shoulder, forcing another's chin up to check her teeth. This one, gentlemen, Sledge bellowed, pointing to a tearful blonde girl, is guaranteed healthy, good stock, can cook, clean, and warm your bed on these cold desert nights. Contract starts at $40. Claire kept her head down, feigning mild interest, her stomach churning. She was looking for one face. She found her at the very end of the line, almost hidden in the shadow, was a Dine girl. She could not have been more than 16. She was small, fine-boned, and radiated a terror so profound it was almost a physical force. Unlike the white women, she wore a simple tag on a string around her neck. It had a number, 23. Claire knew what that meant. The white women were contracted brides. The native women were simply stock, sold by the head. Claire had to do something. Her plan had been to observe, to photograph the ledger, to document. But her plan dissolved when she saw the girl's knuckles, white as she gripped her own hands together. Elodie. Claire moved, a slow, deliberate drift, as if inspecting the women closer. She moved like a customer. She paused near the blonde girl, then near a tired-looking woman in her 30s. She finally stopped in front of the dying girl. "This one?" Claire asked, her voice thin and reedy. "She looks frail. Does she speak English?" Boone Sledge turned, his eyes small and assessing. He looked Claire up and down. "Mrs. Gable, this one is Navajo. Strong as a mule, I guarantee it. Does not talk back. That is a virtue." "Eh?" He laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "She has no tag," Claire said, pointing. The white women had paper tags with their names and origins. The dying girl had only the number. "She does not need a name. She needs a master," Sledge said, turning back to the auction. "Bidding for number 17, the blonde, is at $45. This was her chance. Claire's hand, hidden in the folds of her skirt, was shaking. In her palm was a small, blank wooden tag she had swiped from the post office counter. With her thumbnail, she had gouged a single mark into it, an X. As Sledge's back was turned, Claire's hand darted out. She grabbed the number 23 tag, her fingers fumbling with the string. "What do you think you are doing?" The girl's voice, not Sledge. The dying girl's eyes were wide, staring at Claire's hand. Claire froze. She had the tag. "Be quiet," she whispered. She tried to loop the blank tag over the girl's head. "I said, what in the hell?" Boone Sledge's voice. He had turned back. His eyes narrowed, seeing Claire's hand, seeing the tag. He moved faster than a man his size should. His massive hand clamped down on Claire's wrist, crushing it. The blank tag fell to the dusty floor. "Trying to steal merchandise, Mrs. Gable," he hissed, his face inches from hers. The smell of rotten teeth and whiskey washed over her. "Or perhaps you are not Mrs. Gable at all." He yanked her arm, pulling her from the line and spinning her toward the center of the room. The auction stopped. Every eye was on her. "We got ourselves a thief," Sledge roared, holding her wrist high. "A little do-gooder trying to cheat an honest businessman." Claire cried out in pain as he twisted. He shoved her, hard. She stumbled and fell, her skirts tangling, her purse spilling open. The $50 in scrip, a small notebook, and a single, brass-edged lens filter. Sledge bent down, his boot pinning her skirt to the floor. He picked up the filter, holding it to the light. "Well, now," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "This is professional glass, engraved, too." He read the small etching on the rim. "C. Whitlock, St. Louis." He dropped the filter and backhanded her, hard. "You are not a buyer," he snarled, pulling a revolver from his belt. "You are a spy." The room erupted. Men surged forward, some angry, some just excited. The women against the wall screamed. The chaos was broken by a new sound, a sharp crack as the main tether for the horses outside was severed. A second crack as a kerosene lantern hanging from the rafters shattered, plunging the back half of the room into darkness and spraying hot, stinking oil. "Fire!" someone yelled. Sledge, momentarily blinded, turned toward the door, raising his pistol. A shadow moved through the smoke. It was not a man, but a force. Kai. He did not engage Sledge. He moved to the line of women, a long-bladed knife appearing in his hand. He slashed the ropes binding two of the white women. "Go! Run for the fort!" he ordered in a low, hard voice. Then he was at the end of the line. He grabbed the dying girl's arm. "Ashki Yazi," he said in her own language. "Your mother waits. Go!" He pushed her toward the back window, a small, dark square in the adobe. "Hey!" Sledge roared. Spotting him in the gloom, he fired his pistol. The bullet ripped through the adobe wall, inches from Kai's head. Kai did not flinch. He turned back for Claire. She was on her hands and knees, scrambling for the lens filter. "Leave it," he commanded, grabbing her arm. "Know my name. Your life." He hauled her to her feet, his grip like a steel trap, and threw her toward the window. "Go, now!" Ashki was already through. Claire tumbled out after her, landing hard on the sand. The air was full of grit, stinging her face. Kai emerged a second after her, a ghost in the swirling dust. "This way!" he snapped. Shots rang out from the front of the station. The men, confused and angry, were firing at shadows. "They will follow the tracks," Claire yelled, running to keep up. "We will not leave tracks," Kai said. He led them away from the station, not toward the road, but directly into the rising dunes. He moved at a baffling pace, running low, his feet seeming to barely touch the ground. Claire and Ashki, lungs burning, struggled to follow. They ran for what felt like miles, the sand shifting under their boots, the screams from the station growing faint. Kai led them to a sheer rock face, a wall of red sandstone that looked impassable. He scanned it for a moment, then moved to a place where a tangle of dead brush obscured a narrow crack. He pulled the brush aside. "In here." It was a tunnel, barely shoulder width. He pushed Ashki in first, then Claire. He followed, pulling the brush back into place. They were in total darkness, the air cold and still. They shuffled forward, their hands on the rough stone, until the tunnel opened into a small, circular cavern. A faint light filtered from a chimney-like opening high above. In the center of the room was a pool of water, still and black. Ashki ran to it, falling to her knees and drinking. Claire sank to the ground, her body shaking, her wrist throbbing. Kai did not rest. He stood at the entrance, listening. For a long time, the only sound was the ragged breathing of the two women. Finally, Kai turned. He looked at Claire, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was not angry, it was flat. "Claire Whitlock, I am a reporter." "A reporter," he repeated. "Like the men who write that the dying are savages that must be cleared." "No," Claire said, finding her breath. "I am here to expose them. Sledge, Vexler, the bride contracts, the trafficking." "Expose," he said, testing the word. He walked to the center of the cavern, his eyes on the high opening. "You came here with your picture box." "Yes, to take photographs, to show the world what they are doing." He turned back to her. "Show them Ashki's face. Show them my people as victims, as exhibits. No, as people to get help." "Your help," Kai said, "is a bullet. Your help is a fire. You walk in, break the wasp nest, and walk away. We stay. We get stung." "I was trying to save her," Claire shot back, pointing to Ashki, who was now huddled by the pool, watching them. "You were trying to save yourself," Kai said, his voice dropping, "to make the ghosts quiet." Claire flinched as if he had struck her. He knelt, dipping his hand in the pool. "This is to Alkini, water of the ancestors. This is sacred." He held his wet hand out. "You want to use our faces as your weapons. You want our pain to make your story." "That is not true." "Then promise," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "The pictures, the ones you have, the ones you will take, they are for one purpose, to aim at the men who build the cages. Vexler, Sledge, you do not print her face." He nodded at Ashki. "Or the faces of my family. You do not make us a curiosity for white parlors in St. Louis. You promise." Claire looked at his hand, then at his scarred, intense face. He had saved her life. He had saved Ashki. And he was right. "I promise," she said. He nodded once, satisfied. The bargain was sealed. Miles away, at a different way station, a man named Amos Ridge, a Pinkerton on Vexler's payroll, was sorting through the contents of a scorched wagon. The wagon had belonged to a reporter who had apparently run afoul of some deserters. Most of her equipment was smashed or burned. But he found a heavy wooden box that had been tossed aside, a backup camera, and tucked inside, a velvet bag of lens filters. He pulled one out, the one that Sledge had found a duplicate of. He held it to the light. "See Whitlock." He walked to the telegraph office, a small shack buzzing with imported electricity. He paid the operator and sent a coded message to Santa Fe, to the offices of Baron Silas Vexler. The reply came 2 hours later. Vexler, it seemed, was very interested in finding this C. Whitlock. A bounty was authorized, $500. Alive. At the same time, a second message went out to the foreman at the new coal mine. A protest was to be organized. Some of the miners, fueled by Vexler's whiskey, were to be reminded how the Navajo problem was slowing down their pay. Back in the cavern, the air was cold. "We cannot stay here," Kai said, rising. "They will track you from the station. They will bring dogs." "Where do we go?" Claire asked, her voice raw. She looked at Kai. He had saved her, but he was a stranger, an armed man who knew these lands. A former army scout. She remembered the rumors the scouts played both sides. Kai saw the suspicion in her eyes. It mirrored his own. He was now responsible for a white woman with a death sentence on her head, and a young girl from his clan who was a witness. He did not trust this reporter. Her integrity was a luxury. His was a necessity, but they were, for now, tied together. "I will take you to the Valley of the Wind," he said. "It is the only place Sledge and his men will not follow. My family is there." He looked at Claire, his expression hard. "You will be safe, and you will be watched." The Valley of the Wind was not a valley, but a fortress. It was a vast, sunken canyon system, protected by sheer, unscalable walls of red sandstone. The only entrance was a narrow, twisting slot canyon that Kai had led them through in the dark, a passage wide enough for a horse to walk single file, but impossible for a wagon. Inside, the floor was unexpectedly lush, a small, clear stream, born from a deep spring, cut through the center, feeding patches of corn, squash, and peach trees. Hogan. The traditional dome-shaped homes of the Dane were scattered among the cottonwoods, their smoke rising in thin, straight lines into the clear, protected air. For 2 days, Claire was a ghost. She was watched. The children were curious, but the adults, especially the women, looked at her with a mixture of pity and deep suspicion. She was a white woman, brought in by one of their own, and she carried the stink of the world that had tried to destroy them. Ashki Yazzie was with her family, surrounded by aunts and grandmothers, who were already working to cleanse her of the experience. Kai, too, seemed to vanish, absorbed back into the community, speaking in low, rapid dyne, reporting to the elders. Claire was given a small, empty hogan to sleep in. She was fed, but she was profoundly alone, trapped in this sanctuary, her promise to Kai a heavy weight. She had failed. Her mission to expose the traffickers had ended with her running, her equipment lost, her one contact, the lens filter, now in the hands of Boone Sledge. But she had not lost everything. In the chaos of the fall, as Sledge's men were shooting, she had held on to one thing, the small, stereoscopic camera, and in her satchel, wrapped in dark cloth, was the single glass plate she had managed to load before stumbling into the deserters. One plate. She had the chemicals, small, tightly corked vials of collodion, silver nitrate, and potassium cyanide. carried in a reinforced leather case that never left her side. It was all she had. She found Kai near the stream, watching his nephews mend a fishing net. "I need to develop this," she said, holding up the plate, still in its light-proof holder. His eyes narrowed. "Develop what?" "A photograph. The last one I have." "You promised," he said, his voice flat. "I promised not to show your people as exhibits," she countered, her own voice rising with frustration. "I promised to aim at the men who build the cages. How can I aim if I am blind? I do not even know what is on this plate. Kai, it could be nothing. It could be a blur of my own feet, but I must see." He studied her. The desperation in her eyes was not for a story. It was for a weapon. He nodded. "Once. This way." He took her to an old, unused hogan, set back from the main camp, built into the shadow of an overhang. It was dark as a tomb inside. "You have 1 hour," he said. "I will bring water, clean water." He left her, and she prepared her small, desperate alchemy. She set up her vials in the dark, the air filled with the sharp, acidic smell of the chemicals. Kai returned with a skin of water and a heavy blanket. "This is all I have," he said. He did not understand the process, but he understood the need for absolute darkness. He hung the blanket over the doorway, plunging the hogan into a blackness so complete she could not see her own hands. She worked by feel, her fingers sure and practiced. Despite the shaking in her gut, she poured the sticky collodion onto the glass, tilting it to coat it evenly. She sensitized it in the silver nitrate bath. Then she opened the holder. She poured the developer. She counted, her lips moving silently in the dark. 1, 2, 3. She poured the fixer, the acrid scent of the cyanide making her eyes water. She waited. "Bring the light," she called out, her voice trembling. Kai pulled back the blanket. A single shaft of afternoon sun cut into the gloom. Claire held the glass plate up to the light. It was not a blur, it was sharp. It was a miracle. The angle was low, taken from her hip in the second before she fell. It showed the procession, the chained line of women. It showed Boone's sledge, his face turned in profile, yelling at one of the guards. And it showed the man he was yelling at. He was not a guard. He was a white man, dressed in a fine, dark suit, his hat pushed back. He was smoking a cigar. Even in the harsh light, his features were clear, the heavy jowl, the cold, assessing eyes, the arrogant set of his mouth. "Do you know him?" Claire whispered, her hand shaking so badly the plate nearly slipped. Kai stepped into the light, his shadow falling across her. He looked at the image. He had seen this man, from a distance, at the fort and near the railroad survey camps. "Wexler," he said, Baron Silas Wexler. It was not just a photograph of trafficking. It was a photograph of the owner, the Baron himself, standing beside his property. It was a blood file, proof that tied the money and the power directly to the chains. "My God," Claire breathed. "I have him." At that same moment, 30 miles away at Fort Defiance, another man was making his case. Amos Ridge was not like the other Pinkertons. He was slender, wore spectacles, and carried a leather satchel full of contracts and warrants. His brother had been a crude bounty hunter. Amos was a corporate man. He believed in ledgers, and he believed in diligence. He was here on Wexler's payroll, not for revenge, but to complete a contract. He sat opposite Lieutenant Farnham, a career soldier with tired eyes and a uniform that was clean but frayed at the cuffs. "Lieutenant," Ridge said, sipping the fort's muddy coffee without complaint. "I am here as a courtesy. I have warrants, signed by the federal commissioner in Santa Fe." He slid them across the table. One for a woman, Claire Whitlock, wanted for theft of property from the Apache Wells station, and, he added, in violation of the Espionage Act, we have reason to believe she is spying for rival railroad interests. "Espionage," Farnham said, rubbing his face. "That seems Ambitious, Mr. Ridge. And one, Ridge continued, ignoring him. For a former Army scout known as Red Horse, Kai Nez, wanted for abduction of a ward. He tapped Ashke's name, and for aiding a known fugitive. Farnham sighed. He knew Kai. He respected him, mostly. He also knew this was Vexler's manufactured paper. The Valley of the Wind is sacred ground, protected by treaty. Farnham said, I cannot let you take soldiers in there. It would start a war. I am not asking for soldiers. Lieutenant, I am asking for your official non-interference. Ridge said. He smiled, a thin, reptilian gesture. Baron Vexler understands the precarious position of this fort. He understands your supply lines are thin, and that your water source is unreliable. Farnham stiffened. In fact, Ridge said, he has generously offered to fund, in its entirety, a new aqueduct from the Puerco River, a civic-minded gesture. It would secure this fort, and the town, for the next 20 years. The bribe hung in the air, smelling cleaner than the coffee. Farnham was a good man, but he was also a practical one. He had soldiers and their wives suffering from dysentery every summer because of the bad water. He looked at the warrants. He looked at Ridge. I will not authorize a single soldier to cross the treaty line, Farnham said, his voice hard. But if a wanted fugitive leaves the protection of that valley, the treaty does not cover the open territory. I cannot and will not stop a licensed agent from executing a federal warrant in open land. Amos Ridge stood, satisfied. He had his permission to hunt, as long as he did it outside the sanctuary. He just had to wait for his prey to bolt. News of the warrants and the bounty traveled faster than the telegraph. A dine runner, a young boy who sold jerky at the fort, arrived in the valley just after sundown. Kai listened to the report in the center of the council hogan, his face impassive. $500 for the woman. A clearing operation at the coal seams to begin in 3 days, 72 hours. He found Claire by the stream, washing the chemical smell from her hands. You have your picture, he said. Now we go. Go where to the fort we can show Farnham. Farnham has been bought, Kai said. His voice clipped. He just gave Vexler's man permission to hunt us. There is a bounty on your head, $500, and they have a warrant for me. Claire's stomach clenched. Then what? We leave tonight. I am taking you north, to the Utah territories. You can disappear there. No. He stopped. It is not a request. I am not running, Kai, Claire said, her voice shaking but hard. She stepped in front of him, holding the still damp glass plate. This is not just my story anymore. This is proof. If I run, if I disappear, this. She shook the plate. Dies with me, Vexler wins. Sledge wins. They go on selling girls like Ashke. They go on stealing this land. Your life is worth more than a picture. Is it? She shot back. Is it worth more than Ashke's? Is it worth more than my sister's? I will not run. He stared at her, a muscle working in his scarred jaw. He saw the same suicidal integrity that had made her stumble into the deserters' camp. Then what? He demanded. You will walk into the fort and be arrested. You will be handed to Ridge, and you will be dead before you reach Santa Fe. Then you take me to Santa Fe, she said. He laughed. A single, harsh bark. That is a 4-day ride, through open country, with every bounty hunter and Pinkerton between here and there looking for you. Take me to Ephraim Cole, she pressed. He is the district judge. My editor says he cannot be bought. My concern, Kai said, is my people. Vexler's clearing starts in 3 days. He will push my family from the lower valley. I must be here. I know, Claire said, her voice suddenly gentle. And you need to move the elders, the sick, the children, before those men arrive. He watched her, wary. I was a nurse, she said. a field nurse for 6 months at the siege of Vicksburg. I can tend to them. I can help you move them. We do it together. We move your people to safety, on the way to Santa Fe." This stopped him. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not as a fragile white woman, not as a reckless reporter, but as something else. A tool, a partner, a complication. "A nurse," he repeated. "I know how to set a splint. I know how to stop bleeding. I know how to handle fever. I can help. Kai, let me help." It was a crazy, impossible plan, but it was the only one that served both their needs, his honor and her mission. He nodded, slowly. "We move them toward the high passes. From there, I will take you east. We have 72 hours. That night, the valley was filled with a new sound. Chanting. Claire, unable to sleep, left her hogan. The air was cold, scented with cedar and sage. She followed the low, rhythmic sound to a clearing near the stream. A sweat lodge, a low dome of willow branches and blankets, was dark against the starlight. A massive fire burned nearby, heating a pile of river stones until they glowed a dull red. She watched from the deep shadows. She saw Ashki Yazi, wrapped in a simple white cloth, being led into the lodge by the older women. Then, men carried the glowing stones, one by one, and placed them in the central pit. She saw Kai. He was standing guard, apart from the ceremony, his chest bare, his hair unbound. He was a sentinel. The flap of the lodge was closed. Steam and song poured from it. It was not a gentle song. It was a raw, aching, powerful sound. A song of purification. A song to call a soul back from a dark place. Claire leaned against a tree, her hand over her mouth. She was not a reporter. She was a witness. She felt the deep, profound pain of these people, the trauma of displacement, the constant, grinding weight of holding on. This was what they were fighting for. Not just the land, but the right to heal on it. She turned to go, ashamed of her intrusion. "You should not be here." Kai's voice, low and rough, came from the darkness. He had moved with no sound. "I am sorry," she whispered, her throat tight. I heard the singing. I did not mean to." "They are singing to bring her spirit home," he said. He did not sound angry, just tired. "The things she saw, they leave a mark. We wash it clean." He looked at her, his face a mask of shadow and faint firelight. He saw the tears glistening on her cheeks. They were not tears of pity. They were tears of understanding. He had seen her compassion. It was real. It was not a tool of her trade. It was her trade. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice softening. "We move at dawn." He walked her back to her hogan. The bargain was set. The timeline was running. Later, as the moon began to set, Kai returned to the small, cold cave that overlooked the valley entrance, the Valley of the Wind. He listened to the air move through the high hoodoos. It was a song he had known all his life. He spoke in Dine, a whisper to the wind itself, a vow to the holy people who lived in the rock. He would get this woman to her destination. He would use the white man's road and the white man's law against them. He would use his own skill. He would use every force he had. He would not let this land or this woman's fire be extinguished. They left the Valley of the Wind before the first false dawn, a procession of ghosts moving through the slot canyon. It was not a simple escape. It was a migration. Kai was not just escorting a reporter. He was moving the vulnerable heart of his clan. 7 elders, 2 of whom had to be carried on makeshift travois, 12 children, and 4 women who were either pregnant or nursing. Claire's role was defined immediately. One of the children, a boy of about 6, had fallen from a tree 2 days prior, and his arm was set badly. It was swollen, the fingers a pale, waxy blue. Claire, with a grim professionalism that silenced the watching mothers, had Kai break the splint. She reset the bone herself, her movements quick and economical, her voice a low, steady murmur that soothed the child more than the willow bark tea he had chewed. She earned her place on the trail. By day, they followed the old cattle trails, deep, dusty grooves that twisted through the low mesas, offering concealment but no speed. The heat was a physical enemy. It beat down from a sky the color of bleached tin, reflecting off the red rock until the air itself seemed to vibrate. They moved at the pace of the slowest, the scraping of the travois poles a constant, grim rhythm. Claire walked, her heavy skirts tied up, her satchel containing the single, precious glass plate thumping against her hip. She moved from one child to the next, checking for signs of sunstroke, rationing sips of water from her own canteen, cleaning a cut, fastening a loose moccasin. Kai watched. He saw the fatigue in her, the way her shoulders slumped. But he also saw the iron. She was not a complainer. She was a worker. At night, the mission changed. The elders and children were moved into a hidden box canyon, a place with a small spring known only to the dying. They would be safe there. The main threat, Vexler's clearing, was aimed at the lower valley, not the high, inaccessible rimrock. They will be found, eventually. Kai's uncle, a man with a face like a dried apple, told him in dying. Eventually is not today. Kai replied, "Today they are safe. You are safe." He left them with 2 young men, armed with old rifles and a lifetime of knowledge of these rocks. Then he turned to Claire. Ashki Yazzie, the young witness, stayed with her family, her ordeal ending, her testimony given to the wind. It was just the 2 of them now. "Now," Kai said, his face grim in the moonlight. "We run." He took her east, toward the skeleton of the new world, the unfinished line of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. The tracks were laid, but the line was not yet operational. By night, it was a long, dark, empty highway. They walked the rail ties, the crushed gravel crunching under their boots. It was faster, but it was open. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The steel rails gleamed, cold and blue. "Why the tracks?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "The water?" His voice was low. "The survey crews left cisterns and water barrels at every 10-mile marker. They are guarded, but they are there. We cannot cross this land without them." They walked for 2 nights, drinking sparingly from their canteens, their world reduced to the sound of their own footsteps and the vast, starry emptiness. On the 3rd day, the sky changed. The blue faded, replaced by a sick yellow-brown haze. The wind, which had been a constant, high-pitched whine, fell silent. The air became still, hot and heavy. "What is it?" Claire asked, her hand on the brim of her hat. "Get your canteen," Kai said, his voice sharp. He was looking at the southwestern horizon. "Drink now." "I am not." "Drink and wet your kerchief." She did as he said. He was already pulling a strip of cotton from his own saddlebag, soaking it from his canteen. A low, moaning sound began, like a distant train. Then she saw it. The horizon was not the horizon. It was a wall of black and brown, a mile high, roiling, swallowing the landscape. "A duster?" she breathed. "Down," he ordered. He pulled her into the shallow ditch beside the tracks, shoving her down behind a pile of discarded ties. "Cover your face. Do not move. Do not try to stand. Do not breathe deep." He knelt beside her, a solid, immovable presence. He took the wet kerchief from her hand and, with a rough, impersonal efficiency, tied it around her head, covering her nose and mouth. He secured his own. The storm hit them. It was not wind. It was a solid thing, a physical assault of grit and sand that turned noon into midnight. The sound was a deafening, overwhelming roar. Claire pressed her face into the gravel, her hands over her head, and felt the world being scoured clean. The wind tore at her, trying to pull her from her meager shelter. She felt a hand grip the back of her belt. Kai. He had braced himself against the ties and was holding on to her, a human anchor. She did not know how long they stayed there. An hour. 3. Time dissolved. When the roaring finally subsided, replaced by the old, familiar whine, she dared to lift her head. The world was gone. Everything was a uniform. Shifting, hellish brown. The air was so thick with dust she could not see the tracks. 3 feet in front of her. Kai, she yelled. Her voice was a muffled croak. His hand was still on her belt. Here. I cannot see. No one can. We stay. We will be buried. We will be lost if we move. He shifted, his body closer to hers, creating a small windbreak. This is the long quiet. It will settle. Give it time. They waited. The dust was like a hot wool blanket, choking her. She felt panic rise, a cold, sharp thing in her chest. I cannot breathe right. Yes, you can, he said. His voice was calm, right by her ear. Breathe slow. Through the cloth. He took her hand, the one that was not clutching her satchel. He pulled her glove off, his movements sure in the gloom. He turned her hand over, palm up. Feel this. He held her hand up. The wind is from the north. It is cold. It means the storm is passing. Feel. She felt it. A faint, cooler pressure on her skin. Before, he said. It was from the south. Hot, now, north. We are on the south side of the tracks. The tracks run east. As long as the wind hits our right cheek, we are moving east. He was teaching her. In the middle of the apocalypse, he was giving her a lesson in survival. It was the most practical and most profound act of care she had ever received. The panic receded. He did not let go of her hand. When the air cleared enough to see 10 feet, they moved. 2 shadows in a remade world, the wind pushing them from behind. They found the bridge at dusk. It was an old, wooden trestle, built to cross a deep, dry arroyo, and the men waiting for them had made a fire. There were 3 of them, bounty hunters. They were silhouetted against the flames of their campfire, built right in the middle of the tracks on the far side of the bridge. They are not looking for us, Kai whispered, pulling Claire behind a water tower. They are just here, waiting for anyone. What do we do go down? The arroyo is sheer, 100-foot drop. We cross or we go back. We do not go back. He checked his rifle. They are lazy. They think the storm cleared the world. What is the plan? You walk, I follow. Just walk. No, we create a distraction. How good are you with that pistol you carry? I can hit a barn, she said, her hand on the small revolver in her pocket. The lantern, he said, pointing. On a post near their fire, a kerosene lantern hung, illuminating their small, stupid camp. You do not hit the lantern. You hit the post above it. Draw their fire. When they look your way, I move. And what do I do? You run across the bridge. Kai, that is insane. They are amateurs, he said, his voice cold. They built a fire on a bridge. They deserve to lose. Fire when you are ready. He slipped away, a shadow moving toward the deep darkness under the bridge. Claire was alone. Her heart was a drum. She pulled the revolver. She rested it on the wooden frame of the water tower. She aimed high. As he said, she pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening. The bullet splintered the post, high above the lantern. What the hell was that? One of the men yelled, jumping up and firing his rifle into the darkness toward her. Over there, another yelled. By the tower. They all turned, firing wildly. Now Kai's voice, from right under them. Claire ran. She ran out from behind the tower, her boots pounding on the wooden planks of the bridge. She heard a crack from below, different from the gunfire, a sharp, clear sound. The kerosene lantern exploded, showering the bounty hunters in darkness and burning oil. One of the men screamed as the hot oil hit him. "It is under us, he is under us." Claire kept running. She passed the sputtering fire, the yelling, blinded men, and dove behind a stack of new, unlaid rails on the far side. She looked back. Kai was on the bridge. He had climbed up the trestle and was standing, a tall, dark figure against the last of the brown sky. He was not even breathing hard. He started to walk toward her. One of the men, the one who was not on fire, saw him. He raised his pistol. "You!" He never finished. Kai moved, crossing the 10 feet between them, and struck the man in the throat with the barrel of his rifle. The man went down, a silent, gasping heap. The other two were rolling on the ground, trying to put out the small flames on their clothes. Kai ignored them. He walked over to Claire. "You hit where you were told," he said. It was the highest compliment. She tried to stand, but her legs were shaking. She fell back, and her satchel, the one she had guarded, spilled open. One of her old, dry plates, a landscape of the Mississippi she had kept for sentiment, slid out and shattered on the steel rail. Kai bent down. He picked up a large, curved shard of the glass. He looked at the dim, broken image of a riverbank. "You carry your ghosts," he said. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. This truth you are chasing, it saves no one if it kills your soul first. It is just broken glass." He tossed the shard into the darkness. "Let us go. That light will draw others." They walked for another 6 hours. The adrenaline wore off, and the reality of the last 3 days crashed in on Claire. The dust she had inhaled had coated her throat. Her body was drawing on reserves she no longer had. She stumbled. "Kai, I need a minute." "We do not have a minute." "I am hot," she said, and it was the last coherent thing she thought. She collapsed. Not a faint, a simple, boneless dropping, as if her strings had been cut. Kai caught her before she hit the ground. He swore, a low, hard, dying curse. He put his hand on her forehead. She was burning, the dust, the lack of water, the stress, a high, dangerous fever. He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her for a mile, looking for shelter. He found it a shallow washout, barely a cave. Under a sandstone ledge, he laid her down, using his bedroll. He built a small, smokeless fire of dry sagebrush. He had less than a quarter of a canteen of water left. He spent the night tending to her. He forced tiny sips of water past her cracked lips. He bathed her face and her wrists with his own wet kerchief. In the deepest part of the night, as the fever raged, she began to murmur. About her sister, Elodie, about the contracts, about the blood. Kai sat, watching her, his rifle across his knees. He was a man trapped. And so, to the fire, to the ghosts in the cave. He began to talk. He spoke of his own ghosts. "My family, we walked," he whispered, his voice rough. "They called it the Long Walk. It was 400 miles. We walked from our land to the place, the Huilde Bosque Redondo." Claire's eyes were closed, but her breathing hitched, as if she were listening. "My sister," he said. "She was small. My mother, she carried her. Then my mother could not, so I carried her. She died on my back. She was not heavy, but I have not stopped carrying her." He looked at Claire, her pale face stark in the small firelight. "We all have our ghosts. Little reporter, do not let yours kill you. They have taken enough." He sat in silence for the rest of the night. Far to the west, Amos Ridge knelt by a set of tracks. He was not looking at the tracks, but at the ground beside them. He brushed the dust away. There, preserved in the fine silt, was a boot print. It was small. The heel was narrow. The sole had a distinctive crisscross pattern, a boot made in St. Louis. He looked at his map. He was half a day behind them. and they were heading straight for Santa Fe. When Claire woke, the sun was high. Her fever was broken, but she was weak as a kitten. Kai was gone. She panicked, trying to sit up, but her muscles screamed. He emerged from the arroyo, holding 2 fat desert rabbits. "You are awake," he said. "Eat. We are close to a town, a place called Bernalillo." They reached the outskirts of the town at dusk. 2 days later, Claire was leaning on him, her pride gone, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other. They did not go into the main town. Kai led her to a small, sprawling posada on the edge of town, a place of whitewashed adobe and strings of red chilies. A woman, her hair pure white but her face strong and unlined, was sweeping the porch. She looked up. She saw Kai. "Dios," she whispered. She looked at Claire. "You found trouble. Kainez, or it found you." "Doña Marisol," Kai said. "We need help." "The Pinkertons were here," she said, not stopping her sweeping. "Asking for you, for her, a $500 bounty." Claire's heart sank. "They went east. They think you are ahead of them. You are lucky, or you are smart." She stopped sweeping and looked at them. "I have a cellar, for wine, and for friends, but it costs." "I have no money," Kai said. "I do not need money," Doña Marisol said. "The creek is flooded from the storm. My cousins are trapped on the other side. The bridge is gone. They have sick children." Kai nodded. He understood. "Show me the creek." "I will show you the cellar first," she said. She opened the door. "Get her inside. Then you work for your sanctuary." They were in the cellar, dark and cool, smelling of damp earth, wine, and apples. Before Kai left, Claire grabbed his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked at her, his face unreadable. "I am not a good man. Claire, I am just a necessary one. Rest." He left. She heard him and Doña Marisol making a plan. She was alone, safe, for a few hours. She pulled out her notebook. Her hands were still shaking. She found a stub of a pencil. She wrote, "Truth must walk with kindness, or it is just another gun." She looked at the words. Then she closed the book, lay her head on a sack of potatoes, and fell into a deep, healing sleep. Sanctuary was a sack of potatoes in a dark cellar, and it had lasted only 6 hours. Kai had returned before dawn. His work for Doña Marisol done, he had strung a heavy rope across the flooded creek, a lifeline he crossed 3 times, ferrying medicine, flour, and a terrified child back to the main house. He had done the work of 10 men, his payment a simple nod from the old woman, 2 canteens of fresh water, a bag of dried corn, and a warning. He was here again, the man with the spectacles. She had told him, her voice a low whisper in the pre-dawn chill. "Amos Ridge. He is not stupid. Kai. He is not a bounty hunter. He is a clerk. He follows the paper. He told the alcalde he is tracking railroad equipment thieves. He is smart. He is close." Now, they were in the high rocks again, 30 miles east, and a world away from the relative safety of the railroad tracks. Kai had chosen a brutal, direct path through the high mesas, a route no posse would expect, a route that nearly killed them. Tonight, they were holed up in a shallow alcove, a wide, sandy hollow scooped from the side of a red rock cliff. It was not a cave, but it offered a roof from the sky and, most importantly, a defensible position. A small fire, made of dry, smokeless greasewood, crackled between them. It was the only warmth. The night was cold, the elevation stealing the air of its heat, the stars so close they looked like chips of ice. Far below, in the dark, a coyote yipped, a sharp, lonely sound that was answered by a chorus. Claire shivered, pulling the single, coarse wool blanket tighter around her shoulders. They shared it, sitting on opposite sides of the fire, the blanket draped across their backs, a thin shared line of defense against the cold. Kai passed her the tin cup. "Drink." She took it. It was not a question. It was a command, but a kind one. The coffee was black, bitter, and boiled so strong it was almost syrup. It was hot, and it was life. She drank, the heat spreading through her chest, scalding away some of the fatigue. She passed the cup back to him. Their fingers brushed. It was not the first time. He had pulled her up rock faces. He had held her steady. He had anchored her in the duster. But this was different. This was not survival. This was stillness. She did not pull her hand away. His skin was rough, calloused, but warm. He paused, the cup between them, and looked at her. His eyes, in the firelight, were not black, but a deep, dark brown. He was not the silent, dangerous shadow from the valley. He was the man who had spoken of his sister, the man who had bathed her face when she was sick with fever. She let her fingers rest on the back of his hand. It was a conscious choice, a statement. He did not move, but she felt the change in him, a sudden tension, a stillness that was different from his usual calm. Her eyes traced the line of his jaw in the firelight, past the roughness of his beard, to the scar, the pale, thin line that cut from his cheekbone. She lifted her other hand, the one not touching his, and slowly, she reached out. She stopped an inch from his face. "May I?" she whispered. His breath hitched, the smallest, almost imperceptible sound. He did not lean into her hand, but he did not pull away. He held his ground, giving her the choice. She laid 2 fingers on the scar. It was smooth, old, a different texture from the rest of his skin. It was a mark of the violence he had endured, the violence that had shaped him. To her, it felt like a map of the man himself. A low sound rumbled in his chest. It was a dry, rusty, unused sound, a chuckle. It was so unexpected. She almost pulled her hand back. "You are the first woman," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Who has ever touched that? Who was not paid for it, or my mother?" She smiled, a small, tired smile. "I do not think you are a man who pays for company, Kai." "I am a man who does not like company," he corrected. But the edge was gone from his voice. The firelight danced in his eyes. "Be careful, little reporter. You might be taming me." "I do not think you can be tamed," she said, her fingers still resting on his cheek. "And I would not want to." She let her hand fall away, the moment passing, but leaving something solid in its wake. She settled back, pulling the blanket tighter, but the shiver was gone. She winced, a sharp, involuntary movement. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. My shoulder, it is sore." It was an understatement. The memory of her heavy wooden camera box, the mule, all of it was gone. But her body had not forgotten. The long days of walking, of climbing, of carrying the small, dense weight of her satchel had settled into the muscles of her neck and right shoulder, a deep, burning ache. "Here," he said. He moved, not toward her, but behind her. He sat cross-legged, his back against the rock wall. "Sit in front of me." She hesitated. "I am not going to bite you," he said, with that same dry humor. "The cold is making you stiff. You will be useless tomorrow if you cannot move. Sit." She did. She turned her back to him, shuffling on the sandy floor. So she was sitting between his outstretched legs, her back resting against the warmth of his chest. The shared blanket now covered them both. The intimacy of it was sudden and overwhelming. She could feel his heart, a steady, slow beat against her spine. He placed his hands on her shoulders. They were large and hot. He did not touch her with gentleness. He was not a gentle man. He began to work, his thumbs pressing into the knotted muscle beside her neck, his movements strong, deep, and incredibly, agonizingly painful. Claire gasped, her head dropping forward.
That hurts."
"I know," he said, his voice rumbling through her. "It is supposed to. This is a knot. It is from carrying weight you should not have been carrying. You carry it all the time." He was not just talking about the satchel. His fingers dug deep, finding the root of the pain, and pushed. Claire arched her back, a sharp, breathy sound escaping her lips. It was half pain, half release. "You are a terrible nurse," she breathed, her eyes squeezed shut. "I am a scout," he replied, his thumbs moving in slow, agonizing circles. "I find the problem. I fix it. Breathe." He continued, his hands working, the sharp, specific pain beginning to dissolve into a deep, radiating warmth. The tension she had carried for months, for years, began to unspool. It was more than a massage. It was an exorcism. She felt the grief, the fear, the constant, grinding pressure of her mission begin to loosen its grip. She let her head rest back against his shoulder. Her breathing was deep and ragged. "Do not stop," she whispered. It was not a request. It was a plea. "Do not stop this moment. Do not stop this safety. Do not stop this care." Kai's hand stilled for a second. He had heard that tone before. He had heard it from dying men, and he had heard it from terrified women. This was different. This was trust. A slow smile touched his lips. A smile only the darkness saw. His voice was a low, warm growl in her ear, a vibration that traveled straight through her. "Darlin," he said, his fingers digging in once more, finding the last of the tension and working it free. "I have not even started yet." They sat in silence for a long time after that, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the distant coyotes. He did not move, and she did not move. She was content to lean against him, safe, warm, and, for the first time in years, protected. "We should set a rule," she said, her voice muffled as she spoke to his chest. "A rule? For this, for us. I am not one of them. The women in the contracts, I am not property." He was still for a moment. Then, his hand moved from her shoulder to her hair, his fingers brushing a stray strand from her face. "Among the Dean," he said, his voice quiet. "The Hogan belongs to the woman. The children belong to her clan. The man is a guest. He is there because she chooses him." He paused. "I am your guest. Claire, you are not my property. I am not yours. We are just here. We choose this." She turned then, twisting in the circle of his arms and the blanket, so she could face him. The fire was low, casting shadows across his scarred face. "Elodie," she said, and the name was a stone in her throat. "My sister, the one I told you about, the one who died on the trail." He nodded, his eyes fixed on hers. He waited. She was promised a bride contract to a man in Sacramento she had never met. My father, he was trying to save us. He thought it was a new life. Elodie was so afraid, but she went because she was told to, because she thought she was property of my father or of this new man. She was weeping, silent, hot tears that tracked through the dust on her cheeks. "I am not her, Kai. I will not be." "I know who you are," he said. He did not wipe her tears. He let her have them. "You are the woman who walks into a fire and thinks she can put it out with a cup of water." "And who are you?" she asked, her voice broken. "I was a scout," he said. "I took an oath. I swore it to the Blue Coats. I swore to protect the interests of the United States. It was a lie. I was protecting them from themselves. I was trying to steer them away from my people." He looked into the fire. "I had my own oath, under the blue coat. It was to put my body between the bullets and the people I was paid to protect. I failed. I left." "You are not failing now," she whispered. "I am protecting my own interests now," he said. and his gaze was so intense it was like a physical touch. "I am protecting you." The moment was broken by a sudden, brilliant flash. It was not lightning. It was too bright, too cold. It lit the canyon, turning the red rock blue-white for a split second. It was followed, a moment later, by a silence so profound it was terrifying. Kai was on his feet in one smooth motion, pulling her up with him, kicking the fire apart. The embers scattered, hissing on the sand. "What?" "Dry lightning," he said, his voice all sharp edges again. He was scanning the rim of the canyon, high above them. "The air is charged." He lifted his face. The wind had stopped. The air was dead. And then she smelled it. It was the smell of the duster, but different. It was the smell of hot rock, of ozone, and wet earth. Petrichor, the smell of rain hitting dry land. "But it is not raining," she said. "It is," he said, his voice grim. 20 miles away, in the high peaks. But we will feel it here." He pointed to the narrow, dark cut in the canyon floor, 100 yards below their alcove, the dry arroyo. "That is where the water will go, a wall of it, 10 feet high, and fast enough to carry boulders." He was already gathering their things, his movements swift. "We have to move, now." "Where?" He did not answer. He was moving, low and fast, to the edge of their alcove. Looking out, he froze. "What?" she said, coming up behind him. "Look, down the pass, the way we came." She looked, far in the distance, a pinprick of light, a small, steady fire, too steady to be lightning. "Amos Ridge," she breathed. "He found us." "He found our trail. He is smart. He is on our heels." "Then we go the other way," she said, turning. "Over the top." "No," Kai said, his voice flat. He pointed north, toward the main pass, the only easy way out of this box canyon system. She looked. She saw nothing. "I do not—" "Look higher," he said. She saw it. Another fire, larger, bolder. A camp. 3, maybe 4 men. "Pinkertons," Kai said. "Vexler's men. They are blocking the pass. They are waiting for us. Ridge is pushing us into their arms." They were trapped. A patient, methodical hunter behind them. A wall of hired guns in front of them. And a storm above them. "We are trapped," Claire said, the words tasting like ash. "No," Kai said. He looked at her, and his face was hard as the rock around them. "There is a third way." He pointed. "Not up, not back, not forward." He pointed down. Into the dark, twisting, narrow slot canyon. The Arroyo Seco, the dry riverbed. "You said," Claire whispered, her blood turning to ice. "That is where the water will go." "It is," he said. "It is a death trap, but it is the only way they cannot follow." "We will be drowned, you said it a wall of water." "The storm is 20 miles away," he said, his mind working, calculating. "The water, it will take 2, maybe 3 hours to reach here. The canyon is 4 miles long. If we run, if we do not stop, if we time the flood, we can make it." He grabbed her arm, his grip hard, pulling her from the alcove. "It is a choice. We get caught by Ridge and die. We get caught by the Pinkertons and die. Or we race the flood, and maybe live." He did not wait for her answer. He was already moving. Running was not a word for this. It was a controlled fall into darkness. The slot canyon was not a canyon. It was a scar, a deep, twisting crack in the earth, so narrow in places that Kai had to turn sideways. The walls were smooth, sculpted by 10,000 years of water, and they rose 100 feet, blotting out the stars, leaving only a thin, pale ribbon of sky above. The floor was sand, then gravel, then slick rock. They ran, their footsteps a frantic, echoing triplet in the claustrophobic dark. Kai was in the lead, setting a brutal pace. Claire was behind him, her lungs burning, her satchel thumping against her hip. Behind her was Ashki Yazzie. The girl had refused to be left behind. When Kai and Claire had departed the Valley of the Wind, Ashki had met them at the pass, a small, determined shadow. "My words are the second bullet," she had said in Dine, pointing to Claire's camera. "You take the picture. I will be the voice. I will go to Santa Fe." Now, Claire could hear her, a small, gasping sound in the blackness. "Kai!" Claire yelled, her voice swallowed by the stone. "We cannot." "We do not stop," he yelled back, not slowing. "Do not stop for anything." The air was dead, but it was not silent. A new sound was building, a sound that came not from the sky, but from the earth itself. It was a low, deep vibration that Claire felt in the soles of her boots before she heard it with her ears. A vibration and a smell. The scent of wet earth, of ozone, was now mixed with something else, a cold, subterranean, muddy stench, the smell of things that had been buried for a long time. "It is coming!" Kai roared. He did not look back. "Faster!" They ran. Their mad scramble became a panic. The ground beneath them was vibrating, the stone humming against Claire's outstretched hands. Then they heard it. A deep, guttural roar. It was not the sound of water. It was the sound of a mountain moving. "Here!" Kai's voice. He had stopped, pressing himself into a shallow alcove in the wall. He grabbed Claire, pulling her in, and then reached past her, snatching Ashki's arm, dragging the girl into the small space. He shoved both of them behind him, shielding them with his body. "Do not move," he breathed, his arm a steel bar across Claire's chest. A moment later, the first wave hit. It was not water. It was a slurry of mud, pine needles, and small branches, a 4-foot-high wave of debris that hammered past them at the speed of a running horse. The sound was deafening, a grinding, liquid roar that filled the canyon. "That was the first," Kai yelled over the din. "The first pulse. The next will be bigger. We have to climb." "Climb what?" Claire screamed. The walls were sheer, polished stone. There. He was pointing, not up, but across. The canyon, in this one spot, was wider, a 20-foot gap, and on the other side, a narrow, crumbling ledge, 10 feet higher than the canyon floor. "How?" "This is an old trail, an old bridge." He was pointing at 2 iron rings, set into the stone on their side, and 2 more on the far side, stretched between them. Sagging deep into the middle was a single, ancient, rust-covered chain. It was a relic from an older time, a crossing for dine hunters. "It will not hold," Claire said, her voice shaking. "It will hold," Kai said, "but the water is coming." The roaring was louder. The ground was shaking. A new, larger wave, this one black and oily, carrying a whole uprooted tree, smashed past them, the branches scraping the walls. "Ashki," Kai said, turning to the girl, "you go on my back. You hold on. You do not let go." The girl nodded, her eyes wide with terror, but her mouth set. She clambered onto his back, her arms locking around his neck, her legs around his waist. Kai turned to Claire. "You go first. Hold the chain, hand over hand. Do not look down. I am right behind you." "No," Claire said. "It will not hold all of us. You go, take her. I will find another way." He grabbed her, his fingers biting into her arm. "There is no other way. You foolish woman. You go, or you die. Your picture dies with you. Now, move." He shoved her toward the chain. Claire grabbed it. The rust was thick, flaking off in her hands, the links cold and greasy. "I cannot," she whispered. "Yes, you can." He was behind her. "Look at me." She turned. "I have you." He said, "Go." She turned back. She hooked one leg over the chain, then the other, so she was hanging, her arms and legs wrapped around the cold iron. She began to move, pulling herself, hand over hand, over the black, churning water below. The water was rising. The roar was deafening. She was halfway across, 20 feet to go. She heard a scream, not from Kai, from above. There they are. She looked up. On the rim of the canyon, silhouetted against the dark, stormy sky, were 4 men, the Pinkertons. They had heard the flood and seen them in the lightning flashes. A rifle shot cracked. The bullet sparked off the stone wall, 10 feet above her head. "Keep going! Claire!" Kai's voice boomed. He was on the chain, right behind her, Ashki still clinging to his back. Another shot. This one was closer. It ricocheted, and a chip of rock struck Claire's cheek, drawing blood. She cried out, her hand slipping. The satchel on her hip, the one with the precious glass plate, swung violently, banging against the chain. The clasp burst open. The wooden box holding the glass plate, wrapped in its dark cloth, slipped out. "No!" she screamed. She let go with one hand, a desperate, instinctive grab, and caught it. She caught the box, but she lost her balance. She was hanging by one arm, the satchel swinging, the box in her left hand. "Claire!" Kai yelled. "Drop it!" he roared. "It is not worth your life." "It is," she screamed back. "It is all of it." She could not pull herself up. She was hanging by one hand, her shoulders screaming, the box in the other. A third shot. It hit the chain, 2 feet in front of her. The vibration nearly shook her loose. I cannot get it back in the bag." "Forget the bag." She did not have the strength to pull herself up and hold the box. In a move of pure, frantic desperation, she lifted the box to her mouth. She fumbled with the lid, her fingers numb, and pulled out the single glass plate. She shoved the heavy plate into her mouth, clamping her teeth down on the edge, the taste of chemicals and glass filling her. She let the box and the camera fall. They vanished into the black, churning mud, 20 feet below. She grabbed the chain with her free hand. She was safe. "Go!" Kai yelled. She began to move again, hand over hand, the glass plate a painful, heavy weight in her mouth. Behind her, Kai was moving slower. Ashki was a heavy burden. The chain sagged dangerously under their combined weight. "They are too slow," one of the men on the rim yelled. A rifle fired, not at Claire, at Kai. The bullet struck him. He roared, a sound of pure rage and pain, and his left hand, the one in front, slipped from the chain. He did not fall. His right hand held, but he was hanging by one arm, Ashki clinging to him, her face buried in his back. "Kai!" "Go!" he roared, his voice strained. "Get off the chain! Get the weight off!" He was trying to get his other hand back, but it was useless. She saw the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. She scrambled the last 10 feet, her boots finding the far ledge. She collapsed onto the rock, spitting the glass plate from her mouth, her hands raw and bleeding. "Kai, hold on." He was trying, but he was swinging, his grip failing. She looked at her satchel. It was still heavy. The extra film plates, the ones for the camera she no longer had. Dead weight. She turned back to Kai. "Ashki!" she screamed. "You have to move." The girl, seeing Claire on the ledge, seemed to understand. She began to scramble, climbing off Kai's back and onto the chain in front of him. "Good girl!" Claire yelled. Come to me!" Ashki, light and fast, began to pull herself along the chain. But Kai was still hanging by one arm. He was too weak to pull himself up. "My bag," Claire said, her voice frantic. "Kai, my bag is too heavy." She was about to unbuckle it, to drop the extra plates and use the leather strap as a rope. "No!" a voice screamed. It was Ashki. The girl was halfway, but she had looked back. She saw Kai slipping. She let go of the chain with her feet and swung down. So she was hanging, just like Claire had been. She grabbed the back of Kai's belt. I have him, she screamed. It was just enough. The counterbalance, the slight lift, allowed Kai to get his wounded arm back onto the chain. He was in agony, but he was secure. Pull, he grunted. All three of them. A strange, broken human chain began to move. Kai, pulling himself with one good arm. Ashki, pulling him, and Claire, on the ledge, reaching, her arms outstretched. Almost, Claire sobbed. Almost. Give me your hand. Ashki was close. She reached. Claire grabbed her wrist and hauled her, bodily, onto the ledge. Now, Kai. Kai was at the ledge. He could not pull himself up. My shoulder, it is gone. Jump, Claire said. What? Let go and jump. I will catch you. Claire, that is. A sound, greater than all the others, filled the world. A sound like the earth cracking in two. Kai, Claire screamed. The flood. A wall of water, a solid, 20-foot-high mass of black mud, boulders, and trees, was visible at the far end of the canyon, moving at the speed of an express train. Now? Kai looked at her. He saw her face, streaked with blood and mud, her eyes wide. He saw the trust. He let go of the chain. He used his legs to kick off the far wall, a desperate, lunging jump across the last 6 feet of open air. He hit the ledge hard, his good arm grabbing for Claire. Claire did not catch him. She threw herself onto him, her slight weight a ballast, driving him flat onto the rock as the flood hit. The wall of water smashed into the canyon. A mile-long fist. It struck the chain, and the iron rings tore from the stone with a sound like a cannon shot. The chain vanished. The water rose, churning, a boiling, muddy sea, rising up the cliff wall, its spray soaking them. But they were high enough. They were on the ledge. They were alive. On the far rim, the Pinkertons lowered their rifles, their faces pale in the darkness. They were cut off. Their prey was on the other side of an impassable, and now flooded. Gorge. They could only watch. Claire rolled off Kai. She was shaking. Ashki was curled in a small ball, weeping. Kai lay on his back, his face pale, staring at the sky. His left shoulder was a ruin. The bullet had torn through the muscle. It is bad, Claire whispered, seeing the blood, black in the darkness, pumping from the wound. It is fine, he grunted, trying to sit up. He failed. Claire ripped a long strip of cloth from her petticoat. No, it is not. She packed the wound, hard, her field nurse training taking over. He cried out, a sharp, choked sound. Hold this, she commanded Ashki. The girl, seeing a new mission, crawled over and put both her small, shaking hands on the makeshift bandage. Claire looked around. Her satchel, the extra film, gone, torn from her waist in the final jump. All she had, all that remained of her entire career, was the one single glass plate lying on the rock beside her. Kai's eyes were open. He was watching her. The picture, he whispered, his voice thick. She picked it up. She held it. It is here. Kai, it is safe. Good, he breathed. Good. Ashki looked up, her face a tear-streaked mask of mud. When we get to Santa Fe, she said, her voice small but fierce, I will tell them. I will tell the judge what I saw. I swear, I will. Claire took her camera cloth, the one thing she had left, and wrapped the glass plate in it. Then she finished bandaging Kai's shoulder, tying it tight. They huddled on the ledge, soaked, bleeding, and hunted. Far to the east, barely visible, a single pinprick of light, the first street lamps of Santa Fe. And to the south, moving along the distant, low-lying tracks, a plume of smoke, a smudge against the dark, stormy sky. What is that? Claire asked, her voice numb. Kai pulled himself up on one elbow. His teeth gritted. He knew the schedules. "That," he said, "is Wexler's. It is the night train. He is bringing his own men, the hired guns. The clearing is starting." Claire looked from the lights of Santa Fe to the smoke of the train. The train would be fast. They were on foot, with a wounded man. "He will beat us there," she whispered. "Yes," Kai said, "unless we move." The journey from the ledge was a blur of contained agony. They walked the last 15 miles to Santa Fe in a single, brutal night, driven by the smoke of Wexler's approaching train. Kai was a walking ghost. Claire had bound his shoulder tight, packing the wound, but he was losing blood. He moved in a strange, shuffling lurch, his good hand clamped on his rifle, his face a gray mask of sweat and pain. He did not speak, he only moved, his eyes fixed on the distant, growing lights of the city. Claire and Ashki flanked him, a desperate 3-person crutch, half carrying, half dragging him the last 2 miles. They did not enter the city through the main plaza. They skirted the sleeping adobe houses, sticking to the dark, narrow alleys that smelled of chili smoke and night soil. A figure stepped from the shadows of a high-walled courtyard, and Claire nearly screamed. "You are late," Doña Marisol said. She was not the kindly posada owner. She was a soldier. She looked at Kai, her face grim. "He needs a doctor," Claire whispered, her throat raw. "He needs a miracle," Marisol replied, her voice low. "The doctor is Wexler's. We go to a different church." She led them through a maze of back alleys, her steps silent and sure. She stopped at a heavy wooden door, set in a high adobe wall. "The Santa Fe Gazette," she said. "The editor is a drunk, but his heart is good. He is also in my debt. He is gone. We are not." She unlocked the door and pushed them into a dark space that smelled of paper, lye, and printer's ink. "Here," she said, striking a match. The small flame illuminated a vast, cluttered room, dominated by a massive, silent iron printing press. "You have your weapon," she pointed to Claire's satchel. "This is the cannon." "I need Judge Cole," Claire said, easing Kai down onto a stack of newsprint. He slumped, his eyes closing, his breathing shallow. "Ephraim Cole." "He is a man of paper," Marisol said. "You must give him paper." "I have the negative," Claire said, pulling the cloth-wrapped glass plate from her satchel. "But I need light. I need to make a print. A copy." "Then make it," Marisol said. "I will fetch the judge, and I will fetch a man who can stop that bleeding, if he is not already dead." She looked at Kai with a mixture of pity and respect. "Ashki," Marisol said, turning to the girl. "You stay. You are the second bullet." The old woman vanished back into the alley. "The chemicals," Claire said, her mind racing, pushing past the exhaustion. "They will have them, for engravings." She found a small, windowless storage closet, filled with jugs of acid, trays, and bottles. It was a dark room. It was perfect. "Ashki," she ordered, "bar the front door, and the back. Do not let anyone in." She worked, her hands shaking, but her mind clear. She had the glass negative. She found a box of albumin paper. She set up a single, low-burning lantern, shielded with a red cloth. She would make a contact print. She laid the glass plate, Wexler's face a clear, ghostly negative, onto a sheet of the treated paper. She held it up to the weak. Safe light, counting 1, 2, 3. The alley door rattled. Ashki yelped. "Someone is here!" Claire's heart stopped. She pulled the plate and paper apart, her test unfinished. "Doña Marisol," Claire called out. "It is I," a man's voice called, deep and tired. "Marisol sent me. She said it was a matter of life and of the law." Claire unbarred the door. A tall, thin man stood there, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He looked at the chaos of the press, at Kai, who was now barely conscious, and at Ashki, who was holding a heavy printer's tool like a club. "I am Ephraim Cole," he said. "I am Claire Whitlock." She was holding the glass plate in one hand, the blank print in the other. "Marisol is, persuasive," Cole said, stepping inside. "She said you had proof of the Apache Wells incident." "I have more than that," Claire said. She held up the glass plate. "I have him." Cole stepped closer, squinting. "It is just a piece of glass, Miss Whitlock." "It is a negative," Claire said. "I do not have time to print it. Look." She held it over the lantern. Cole leaned in. His eyes widened. He saw the ghostly, reversed image, the line of chained women, the face of Boone Sledge, and the clear, unmistakable, arrogant face of Baron Silas Vexler. "My God," Cole whispered. This is—" "Proof," Claire said. "It is an accusation," Cole said, straightening up, his face hardening. "It is a picture. It could be faked. It is ambiguous." Ambiguous, Claire was incredulous. "They are in chains." "Miss Whitlock," Cole said, his voice laced with the weariness of a man who knows his city. "Baron Vexler is the single largest investor in this territory. He is funding the new aqueduct. He paid for the church bells. I cannot stop his operations. I cannot arrest his men on the basis of one ambiguous photograph." "Then you are a coward," Claire spat. "I am a lawyer," Cole corrected. "This is not enough. To Vexler, this is a gnat. He will crush it. He will crush you. I need more. I need a living witness. She is here." The voice was small, but it cut through the room. Ashki Yazzie stepped from the shadows. "I am here," she said, her voice shaking. "I am the girl. I am number 23. Cole looked at her, his expression unreadable. "She does not speak English well," Claire said. "I do," Doña Marisol said, slipping back in through the alley door. She was not alone. Behind her was a short, older man, carrying a worn leather bag. A doctor. He moved immediately to Kai, ignoring everyone. "She speaks Dine," Marisol said, standing beside Ashki, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "And I speak the law. Tell him, child." Ashki's story came out, not as a flood, but as a series of hard, polished stones. She spoke in her own language, her voice low and steady. She spoke of the raid on her Hogan. She spoke of the long walk. She spoke of the auction house, of Boone Sledge's hands, of the numbers on the tags. Doña Marisol translated, her own voice flat, without emotion, letting the words do their work. "She says they sold her cousin for $20 and a bag of flour. She says Sledge told Vexler that the new stock was strong, but small." Cole stood, his head bowed. He was not looking at Ashki. He was looking at his own hands. The story continued. A quiet, brutal litany in the dark, ink-smelling room. When Ashki finished, there was a profound silence, broken only by a low groan from Kai as the doctor probed his wound. Cole lifted his head. His face was pale. The lawyer was gone. The man was present. "It is enough," he said, his voice hoarse. He pulled a sheaf of papers from his satchel, and a pen. He walked to the typesetter's desk, dipped the pen, and began to write. "This is not a writ for Vexler," he said, the pen scratching furiously. "He is too insulated. But Sledge is the hand. I can take the hand." He wrote, signing his name with a flourish. "An arrest warrant for Boone Sledge, for kidnapping and trafficking, and—" He took a new sheet. "An injunction, a temporary order, signed by my authority as district judge, halting all clearing operations and relocation contracts by Vexler's company, pending a full hearing." He handed the papers to Claire, It is paper, but it is paper with teeth. Thank you, Claire whispered, clutching them. A heavy bang on the front door made them all jump. Open up, a man's voice roared. By authority of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, Cole's face went white. Amos Ridge. Another bang, this time with a rifle butt. The heavy wooden bars shivered. He found us, Claire said. This way, Kai's voice, a harsh grate. He was on his feet. The doctor was holding him, but Kai was standing. His left arm was in a tight sling, his shirt gone, his shoulder a mass of white bandages. His face was a death mask, but his eyes were alive. The back, he rasped. They are at the back, too, Ashke screamed, looking out the rear window. The men from the cliff, the Pinkertons. They were surrounded. Amos Ridge's voice came again. You have 10 seconds, Judge, or I'm coming in. You cannot, Cole yelled, his voice shaking. This is private property, I'm a judge. You are aiding a fugitive and a murderer, Ridge roared. A shot blasted through the lock. The door shuddered. He is coming in, Claire said, her mind numb. No, Kai said. He looked around, his eyes wild. He saw the printing press. He saw the cans of ink. He grabbed a 1-gallon can of black ink, a heavy metal container. The alley, he said to Claire. He wants you. What? Go out the side, the small window. Distract him. I will do the rest. Kai, you cannot fight him. You are... Go! The front door burst open. Amos Ridge stood there, framed in the pre-dawn light, a pistol in each hand. It is over, he said. No, a voice said. Ridge turned. Kai was standing on top of the printing press. He was 10 feet up, swaying, a wounded, terrifying figure. In his one good hand, he held the can of ink. You are supposed to be dead. Ridge stammered. Not yet, Kai said. He did not throw the can. He uncapped it, a single practiced twist, and poured. A gallon of thick, viscous, sticky printer's ink cascaded down. Ridge, looking up, received the entire torrent in his face. He screamed, a high, thin sound. As the lye and oil-based ink hit his eyes, he dropped his pistols, clawing at his face, temporarily and completely blinded. Now, Kai yelled, and collapsed, sliding from the top of the press to the floor. As Ridge screamed, the other door, the back door, burst open. 2 Pinkertons, Vexler's hired guns, charged in. Ridge, what the hell? They saw the scene Ridge on the ground, clawing at his face, the judge in the corner, and Claire, holding the glass plate. Get the plate, one of them yelled, recognizing her. Vexler said destroy the plate. He raised his rifle. No, Claire yelled. She looked around, frantic. On the desk, in the mess of the darkroom supplies, was another glass plate, an old, useless test, a blurred landscape. She grabbed it. Here, she screamed, and with all her might, she threw the fake plate, the landscape negative, out the shattered front door. It sailed into the street and shattered on the cobblestones. She threw it, the first Pinkerton yelled. It is gone. Get her, the second one said, but he was too late. A sound of boots, marching in formation. Halt, United States Cavalry! Lieutenant Farnham, his face grim, stepped into the doorway, flanked by 4 armed troopers. Thank God, Cole said, stepping forward. Lieutenant, arrest these men. They have assaulted a judge, and... Farnham did not look at him. He was looking at a small piece of paper in his hand, a telegraph. Judge Cole, Farnham said, his voice dead. I am here to secure this building, under orders. Good, Cole said. Secure it. My orders, Farnham said. And it was the hardest sentence of his life. are to secure it for Baron Wexler. He has filed a claim for damages caused by these fugitives." He looked at Claire, his eyes full of shame. "And I have a new order. From the territorial governor. You are to be detained, Miss Whitlock, for espionage." "What?" Cole roared. "This is a betrayal. You cannot—" "I am a soldier," Farnham said, his voice breaking. "I follow orders. My men are to escort these gentlemen." He nodded to the Pinkertons, who were now smiling. "To the edge of town. They are to cease their operations." He turned to his men. "Escort them out." The two Pinkertons, laughing, walked out, past the troopers. Farnham, his face a mask of misery, followed, his men forming a wall. They were alone, abandoned. The doctor was kneeling by Kai, who was unconscious. Amos Ridge was still on the floor, moaning, his hands over his ruined eyes. And Claire was standing there, holding the real plate, the warrant, and the injunction. "He won," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Wexler won." "Not yet," Cole said, his voice shaking with a new, cold fury. He walked over to the whimpering, blinded Amos Ridge. He kicked one of the man's pistols away. He picked up the other. "The alley," he said. "What?" Claire asked. "The alley. Now. We are leaving." They heard shouting in the street. Wexler's men, the ones from the train, were arriving, drawn by the commotion. "Get Kai," Cole ordered the doctor. "Ashki, Marisol, we leave, now." They half-dragged, half-carried Kai out the side window, into a narrow, dark alley. Cole hauled the blinded Amos Ridge with them, shoving him against the wall. You cannot," Ridge moaned, his hands still at his face. I am an agent." "You are a monster," Cole said. A shadow fell over them. Kai, he was awake. He had taken the pistol from Cole's belt. He was standing over Amos Ridge, his good hand holding the heavy revolver, shaking with effort. This was it. The man who had hunted him. The man who had caused this. He raised the pistol. Ridge, hearing the click, sobbed. Claire watched. She saw the temptation, the rage, the exhaustion. Kai held the pistol there for a long, silent second. Then, with a grunt, he flipped the pistol, holding it by the barrel. He did not shoot. He swung it, once. A short, brutal arc, hitting Ridge in the side of the head. Ridge collapsed, unconscious. Kai slumped against the wall, dropping the pistol. "Justice," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. As he slid to the ground, "It has to be able to stand, in the sunlight." Cole stared at him. Then he grabbed the pistol. He grabbed the ropes that had been used to bundle newspapers. He tied Ridge's hands and feet. "They will be at the front," Marisol said, her voice urgent. "The alley. It leads to the plaza. We must run." "Go," Cole said. "Take him. Take the evidence. I will stay." "What?" Claire said. "I am a judge," Cole said, his face set. "I am going to sit on the steps of my courthouse, with a bound and blind Pinkerton, and I am going to wait for the army, and I am going to see what happens when the sun comes up." He pushed them. "Go live and use those papers." The alley was a blur of running, stumbling, and pain. Doña Marisol led them, a grim shadow, through a maze of sleeping Santa Fe, her knowledge of the city's secret paths absolute. They did not go far. The doctor, a small, furious man named Mateo, refused. "He will die in the street," the doctor hissed, helping Marisol drag Kai through a low doorway. "He is dying now. I stop the bleeding, or you bury him. Choose." The sanctuary was a small, clean room behind a bakery, smelling of lye, herbs, and, faintly, of baking bread. They laid Kai on a narrow cot, He was unconscious, his breathing a shallow, wet rattle. Ashki stood in the corner, holding the heavy cloth-wrapped glass plate, her knuckles white. "Out," the doctor said to Claire. "All of you. I need hot water, whiskey, and silence." Marisol pushed Claire toward the door. "Let him work. We have other work." Dawn was breaking. It was a cold, gray light illuminating the plaza, which was already beginning to stir. And in the center of it, on the steps of the courthouse, sat Judge Ephraim Cole. He was not alone. At his feet, bound and moaning, was Amos Ridge. The ink had been washed from his eyes, but the lie had done its work. He was blinded, a weeping, broken example of Wexler's reach. The town woke up to this spectacle. A wagoner stopped. A woman going to market crossed herself. A smith, his apron on, stood and watched. "That is Judge Cole," someone whispered. "And that, my God, that is one of the Pinkertons," said another. Lieutenant Farnham arrived, his uniform immaculate, his face a mask of gray exhaustion. He was flanked by 4 troopers. "Judge," Farnham said, his voice low. "Official, this is irregular. You must come inside. The man needs medical attention." "He is a kidnapper, Lieutenant," Cole said, his voice carrying in the clear morning air. The crowd grew quiet. "He is a conspirator to trafficking. He assaulted a federal judge. He," Cole pointed at the whimpering Ridge, "is the law of Wexler imported." "Judge, I have my orders." "Your orders." Cole cut him off, his voice rising. "We're to aid a fugitive. Your orders were to abandon your post. Your orders were to let this," he jested at Ridge, "happen. How do those orders feel in the light, Lieutenant?" Farnham flinched. The crowd murmured, their eyes turning from Cole to the soldier. Farnham was a proud man. He was, at his core, a good man, and he had been shamed. "What do you want, Judge?" Farnham asked, his voice tight. "I want the law," Cole said. "I issued a warrant yesterday for a man named Boone Sledge. Find him. Bring him to me." "He is Wexler's man. He will be at the depot." "Then go, be a soldier, or be his errand boy." Farnham's face hardened. He turned to his men. "Sergeant, you heard the judge? Find Boone Sledge. Bring him. In irons." This was the shift, the moment the tide turned. Doña Marisol, who had been watching from the shadows of a portico, turned to Claire. "It is time. The judge has bought us the morning. We must give him the afternoon." "Kai," Claire whispered, looking back at the bakery. "The doctor will do his work. You do yours." They did not go back to the Gazette. Marisol took her to a different press, a smaller, older one, hidden in the cellar of a saddle shop. It was owned by a man loyal to her. "Here," Marisol said, "make your cannonball." Claire worked, not as a reporter, but as a munitions expert. Her hands were steady. The print she pulled was clean, sharp, and damning. The faces of Wexler and Sledge over the line of chained women. She returned to the plaza. It was now late morning. The crowd had swelled to nearly 100. They were quiet, waiting. Farnham had returned. His men held Boone Sledge, who looked baffled and terrified. In the center of the plaza, Claire walked past the soldiers. She walked up the steps and stood beside Judge Cole. She held the photograph high, turning it so all could see. "This," she said, her voice clear, ringing, "is Baron Wexler. This is his business." A gasp went through the crowd. It was one thing to hear rumors. It was another to see the photograph. "And this," Cole said, holding up a piece of paper, "is the confession of Boone Sledge, who, in exchange for a lighter sentence, has told us everything." Claire looked at him, stunned. He had bluffed. Sledge had not confessed. But Sledge, hearing this, seeing the crowd, seeing the noose in their eyes, panicked. "It was not me," Sledge screamed, struggling against the soldiers. "It was him, Wexler. He paid for it all, the contracts, the girls, the clearing. He paid Ridge. He paid the governor. It was all him." Cole smiled, a thin, cold smile. He dipped his pen in an inkwell and held the paper out. "Then sign it, Mr. Sledge. Sign your truth." Sledge, his hands shaking, signed. The crowd roared. The bluff had become fact. Miles away, in his office at the rail depot, Baron Silas Wexler heard the roar. A runner, one of his paid men, burst in, his face pale. "They have Sledge. They have a picture. The whole town is in the plaza. The army is with them." Wexler did not hesitate. He was a man of capital. He knew when to cut his losses. "Fire the engine," he snapped to his foreman. "My private car, now. We are leaving for Denver." He began stuffing papers into a leather satchel. At the bakery, Kai was awake. The bullet was out. His shoulder was a white-hot agony, but the doctor had poured laudanum down his throat, and his head was clear. "He is running," Kai rasped. Marisol was there. "Yes, his engine is firing up." "The switch," Kai said, struggling to sit up. He cannot leave the main line. The switch." "You are not moving," the doctor said. "The hell I am not," Kai said, pushing himself to his feet. He swayed, the room spinning. Marisol and 2 miners, men whose land Wexler had tried to steal, grabbed him. "We will do it," one of the miners said. "No," Kai said. "I know the yard. I know the lock. You just carry me." They moved, a strange, wounded procession, through the back streets toward the rail yard. They were not a war party. They were 3 men and a ghost. The yard was chaos. Wexler's train, a single opulent private car and a powerful engine, was hissing, ready to move. Wexler himself was just running from the depot, his satchel in hand. "Stop him!" Wexler yelled, seeing the miners. Kai and Marisol were already at the switch, a heavy iron lever set in the ground. "The lock," Kai grunted. "Break the lock." A Pinkerton guard raised his rifle. Marisol fired first, a small pistol from her skirts. The man yelled and dropped his gun. The miner took a crowbar to the heavy brass lock, shattering it. "Not the rail," Kai ordered, his voice thin. "The points. Jam the points." He knew, even wounded, what to do. He pointed, and the miner slammed the crowbar into the switching mechanism itself, jamming the points, forcing the track to stay connected to the local siding. The main line, the escape route, was severed. Wexler saw it. He saw his engine, unable to move, blocked by its own broken switch. He screamed, a sound of pure, animal rage. He did not run for the train. He ran for the one place he felt safe, his fortress. He ran up the hill of coal, the massive black mountain he owned, that loomed over the yard. He scrambled up the side, his fine suit ruined, toward the loading chute at the top. When he got there, he was not alone. Kai was waiting. He was leaning on the crowbar, his left arm useless, his face pale as ash, but he was standing. "Savage," Wexler hissed, pulling a small, nickel-plated revolver from his pocket. "You cannot stop this. You cannot stop me. I am this territory." "You are a thief," Kai said, his voice quiet. "I am civilization," Wexler shrieked, the wind whipping his words, carrying the black coal dust. "I bring order, I bring industry, I build you. You are just the dirt I am building on. You should have been cleared. You should all be cleared." He raised his pistol. Wexler. Claire's voice, the crowd, the entire enraged population of Santa Fe was pouring into the rail yard. They had come from the plaza. Claire was at the front, Ashki beside her. "His confession!" Claire yelled, holding Sledge's paper high. We have his confession. Wexler, trapped, his back to the coal chute, Kai in front of him. The whole town below finally broke. He screamed, a wordless sound, and fired. Not at Kai. At the crowd, he fired 1, 2, 3 times, wildly. People scattered. Kai, with the last of his strength, lunged. He did not use his weapon. He used his body. He slammed his good shoulder into Wexler's chest. Wexler stumbled back, firing again as he fell. The bullet did not hit Kai. It slammed into the heavy iron machinery of the coal chute, inches from Kai's head. A piece of iron, a sharp, heavy shard from the mechanism, flew off, white-hot from the impact. It struck Kai, slashing across his right side, cutting through his shirt, opening a long, bloody gash along his ribs. He staggered, a sharp cry torn from his throat, and fell to his knees. Wexler, scrambling, tried to rise, but it was too late. The miners were on him, a tide of angry men. They grabbed him, his pistol, his satchel. They hauled him to his feet, his power gone. Just a small, terrified man in a dusty suit. Claire ran past them. She ran to Kai, who was on his hands and knees, blood pouring from the new wound. "No," she whispered, falling beside him. "No, no." She pressed her hands to the wound, her dress, her hands, instantly covered in his blood. He was hurt, badly, on top of the shoulder wound. He was shaking, his body going into shock. "Kai," she sobbed. "Hold on, please, the doctor is here." He was gasping, his energy gone, his life seeping into the coal dust. "Don't stop," she whispered, her voice fierce, her tears dropping onto his face. "Do not stop. Do not you dare give up on me. Not now." He looked at her, his eyes, full of pain, found hers. That slow, rough chuckle, a wet, bloody sound, rumbled in his chest. He lifted his good hand, smearing her cheek with his own blood. "Darlin," he rasped, his voice a thread. We have not even started living yet." A new sound, a train whistle, clean and sharp, from the main line, not Wexler's. A train, a single, official car, rolled into the station. Men in clean, dark suits stepped out, federal marshals. The Pinkertons who were left, the ones who had not run, saw the stars on their chests, and they simply vanished. They slipped into the crowd and were gone. The fall was complete. That afternoon, Wexler in irons was put on that same train, heading east to face a federal trial. Boone's sledge was not so lucky. The miners, joined by Farnham's men, took him, tied him to the loading post at the rail depot, and left him there, with a sign that said, "Thief, liar, slaver." And in the courthouse, in the main hall, the editor of the Gazette, now sober and terrified, ran the headline of his life. But Judge Cole did something else. He took the glass plate, the negative that had started it all. He had it framed. He hung it in the main hall of the courthouse. And below it, on a clean sheet of paper, a young woman signed her name to her official testimony, her hand guided by Doña Marisol. Ashki Yazzie, witness. Healing is not a clean process. It is a slow, ugly, and painful fight, and Kai was losing. He spent 3 days in the small room behind the bakery, a place that reeked of blood, whiskey, and the sharp, herbal smell of the doctor's poultices. He did not know where he was. He was in the wheeldee again, on the long walk, his sister's weight on his back. He was in the slot canyon, the water rising. He was on the coal hill, the iron shard cutting him. He fought, thrashing against the ropes Dr. Mateo had been forced to use, his voice a low, delirious moan of dying curses. Claire never left. She sat on a small stool, her hands raw, her dress still stained with his blood. She was the nurse again. She held him down. She bathed his face, which was hot with a raging fever. She forced water and then broth, past his cracked lips. She changed the bandages on his shoulder and the deep, septic gash in his side. She was his anchor, the one solid thing in his fever dream. On the fourth day, the fever broke. He woke, his eyes clear for the first time. He was weak, he was hollowed out, but he was alive. He saw her, asleep on the stool, her head on the edge of his cot, her hand near his. He looked at her face, pale and smudged with dirt, the lines of exhaustion carved deep around her eyes. She was not a reporter. She was not a white woman. She was Claire. He lifted his good hand, a movement that cost him all his strength, and laid it on her hair. She woke instantly, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with a fear that softened when she saw him. "You are back," she whispered. "Not yet," he rasped, his throat like sand. "But I am working on it." While Kai fought his private war, Santa Fe was fighting a public one. The reckoning began with Lieutenant Farnham. 2 days after Wexler's arrest, a small, somber delegation of dying elders, led by Kai's uncle and Doña Marisol, met with the army on the plaza. They did not come to beg, they came to bear witness. Lieutenant Farnham, his face pale, his uniform immaculate, met them. He did not hide in his office. He stood on the courthouse steps, in the same spot Judge Cole had held. Kai's uncle spoke. He was a small man, his words soft, but Marisol, translating, gave them weight. He spoke of the broken treaties. He spoke of the stolen land. He spoke of Wexler's men, and of the army's silence. When he finished, there was a long, terrible silence. Farnham did not make excuses. He did not cite his orders. He unbuckled his sword belt, a gesture of profound submission, and laid it on the steps. "I am a soldier of the United States," he said, his voice clear and loud, for the whole town to hear. "And my service has been used to protect thieves. My silence has allowed monsters to flourish. I failed my oath, and I have failed you." He turned to Kai's uncle. I cannot undo the shame. I cannot bring back the dead. But I am offering my word, and the word of my command." He made 2 promises. First, a new well and water station, built by Army engineers, would be dug not for the railroad, but for the den at the mouth of the Valley of the Wind. Second, he was petitioning his superiors for the funding and the staff to build a traveling school, one that would teach English and arithmetic, but would be taught by those who respected the Dinah, not those who wished to erase them. It was not forgiveness, but it was a start. It was an apology made of stone and water. Claire, watching from the edge of the plaza, felt a new weight settle on her. Her own responsibility. She had the photograph. The Gazette had run a crude, blurry engraving of it. A national sensation. Telegraphs were arriving from St. Louis, from New York, from Washington. They wanted her story. They wanted her. But she was looking at the faces in the crowd. The miners, the women, the dying. She spent the next day not at the telegraph office, but at the saddle shop's printing press. She made 5 perfect, clear contact prints from the glass negative. She did not send them to the newspapers. She gave the first to Judge Cole. She gave the second to Ashki Yazzie. The other 3, she took them, along with Doña Marisol, to the families of the victims. She found the mother of one of the white women from the auction, a woman who now worked in the bakery. She found the husband of another. She showed them the picture, and she made a new promise. "I will not print this," she said, her voice quiet. "I will not put your daughter's face, or your wife's, in a newspaper for strangers to look at. This is yours. Her memory, not my story." She offered them the print. "If you wish me to," she said, "I will cut her face from the negative. I will erase her from it, so no one can ever use it." The mother wept, holding the print. "No," she whispered. "Let her be seen, but let her be seen as she was. Let her be seen by us." Claire did not publish the photograph. She wrote her story, a long, brutal, factual account, but she did not use the names or the faces of the women. Her story was about Wexler, about Sledge, about the system. She would not, she had sworn, build her new life on the bones of their pain. On the 10th day, Kai was strong enough to stand. He was thin, scarred, and moved with a new, stiff-legged gait, but he was alive. He walked, with Claire's help, from the bakery. They did not go far. They walked to the edge of town, to a small, quiet place where a single ancient juniper tree stood, overlooking the road east. The air was clean, the sky a hard, painful blue. Kai was carrying something, a small, tin box. He opened it. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, was a tarnished piece of metal, a Chief Scout's badge, issued by the United States Cavalry. He looked at it for a long time. It was his past, his shame, his pride. It was a lie, he said, his voice still rough. I wore this, and I let my people be taken. You were one man, Claire said, her hand on his good arm. I was a fool, he said. I thought I could be two things at once, a Dine and a soldier. I was neither. He dug a small hole at the base of the juniper. Using his knife and his one good hand, he placed the tin box inside and covered it with dirt and stones. He was not a scout anymore. He was just a man. Claire, in turn, had brought something of her own, a small, rolled-up newspaper. It was her first big story, from St. Louis, a sensational, breathless account of a society scandal, full of unnamed sources and moral outrage. It had made her career. She looked at it. I was so proud of this, she whispered. I thought being a reporter meant being loud, being first. She struck a match and held it to the corner of the paper. I was not a reporter, she said, as the paper curled and turned to black ash. I was just a gun. They stood there for a long time, the smell of the burning paper and the sharp scent of the juniper mixing in the clean, cold air. They were burying their old selves, together. The law, too, was building new ground. Judge Cole, empowered by the federal warrants and the public confession, did something radical. He set a date for the grand jury hearing, and he did not just impanel the usual merchants and ranchers. He sent formal invitations to Kai's uncle, to Doña Marisol, to the head of the Miners' Guild. He was inviting the Dine, the Nuevo Mexicanos, and the poor to sit in judgment. He was not just applying the law, he was remaking it. That night, Santa Fe was alive. It was not a celebration, it was a release. Doña Marisol, in the courtyard behind her posada, held a feast. It was not for the town, it was for the survivors. She served blue corn atole, a thick, hot gruel, and bowls of pozole thick with red chili and pork. It was the food of the land, the food of healing. Claire sat by the fire, her plate full, and Ashki sat beside her. The young girl, who was now enrolled in the new mission school, was teaching her. Yati, Ashki said, pointing to Claire. Yati, Claire repeated, the word clumsy and beautiful on her tongue. Hello? Across the fire, Kai, his arm in a sling, his side tightly bound, was in a conversation with Doña Marisol's brother, a man who spoke only Spanish. Despacio, Kai said, his face a mask of concentration. Por favor, slowly. He was trying. He, who had always lived between worlds, was reaching for a new one. It was 2 weeks later. The snows had begun in the high country, and the air was sharp. Kai was healed enough to ride. They left Santa Fe, not as fugitives, but as citizens. They rode west, back toward the high, red walls of the Valley of the Wind. When they arrived, the valley was changed. The Army engineers were there, at the mouth of the canyon, not with guns, but with shovels. Lieutenant Farnham was with them, his coat off, his sleeves rolled up, working beside his men, digging the new well. Kai did not go to his family's hogan. He took Claire to a place she had never seen, a high shelf of land, protected from the wind, where the stream made a sharp, clear bend. He began to work. He was still one-handed, but he was not alone. His uncles, his cousins, the miners he had helped, they came. They worked. They were building a house, not a hogan, not a white man's shack, but something in between. A small, solid cabin of pine logs, with a wide, open porch facing the stream. Claire worked beside them, chinking the logs with mud and straw. Her hands, once soft and stained with chemicals, now hard and stained with earth. She had one thing left from her old life. It was a single, blurred glass plate, the test she had run, the landscape, the one she had almost thrown at the Pinkertons. It was useless as a photograph. It was a blur of light and shadow. She hung it in the window of the new cabin, not by a frame, but by a simple leather thong. It was not a picture. It was a talisman, a reminder. The house was not finished. It had a frame and a roof, but no door. They stood on the new porch, the wind moving through the open space. It is not St. Louis," Claire said, looking at the raw wood. "No," Kai said, "it is not." He turned to her. He did not have a ring. He did not have a contract. I cannot promise you a safe life. Claire," he said, his voice low, his good hand finding hers. "This land, it is hard. It will try to kill you." "I know," she said. "I am not a husband. I am not a white man. I do not own you." "I know," she said, her voice softer. "But I will. I will choose you," he said, his voice rough. "Every day, I will put my body between you and the bullets. I will protect your choices. I will be your guest." She smiled. The tears, for the first time, were not of grief, but of a fierce, profound joy. "And I will choose you, Kainez," she said. "I will not possess you. I will not own you, but I will promise to stand with you, to protect you." It was not a marriage. It was a vow. In Santa Fe, two things happened. Lieutenant Farnham, his work on the well complete, filed a formal request for transfer. He asked to be reassigned, to patrol the new, protected routes for the native tribes, a guardian, not a jailer. And Ashki Yazi, in her first formal English class, stood and introduced herself. She told the teacher her name, and she told him she was going to learn to be a translator. She was going to be a voice. The echoes were already beginning. The rains came. It had been nearly a year of dust, dry wind, and the slow, hard work of rebuilding. The sky had been a merciless, white-hot sheet of metal for 6 straight months. Then, one afternoon, the air changed. The wind stopped. The sky turned a deep, bruised, greenish purple. It broke not with a gentle promise, but with a sudden, violent, cleansing roar. In the Valley of the Wind, the smell was intoxicating. It was the scent Claire had first associated with terror, the smell of wet earth. But now, it was not the smell of a rising flood. It was the smell of life, the parched sagebrush, the cedar, the thirsty sand. All of it released a perfume that was sharp, clean, and full of promise. From the porch of the new, finished cabin, Claire and Kai stood and watched the small stream that cut through their land, the one they had built beside, transformed from a polite, clear trickle into a happy, churning, muddy rush. Kai stood, his left arm in a sling. The shoulder had healed, but it would always be stiff, a permanent reminder. The scar on his side was a long, puckered, angry red line. He closed his eyes and breathed in, his chest expanding. He was thinner than he had been, but he was solid. "It is here," he murmured, more to the wind than to her. "The rain." Claire leaned against him, her head resting on his good shoulder, her hand on his arm. They stood in silence, listening to the drumbeat of the rain on their new shingle roof. The house was real. It was theirs. A new sound joined the rush of the water, the high-pitched, thin bleating of sheep, and the answering, joyous shouts of children. Kai's nephews, their faces slick with rain, were driving the flock down from the high mesas, their coats dark and heavy with water. They ran past the cabin, waving, their laughter sharp and clear. This was the new peace, not silence, but life. The legal battle. The war of paper had ended months ago. The headlines in the Eastern papers had been explosive. The Baron of Bondage, the Santa Fe ring smashed, Baron Silas Wexler, stripped of his title and his honor, had been found guilty in a federal court. He had been sentenced to 30 years. His vast, stolen wealth, built on coal and human misery, was carefully, methodically dissected by Judge Ephraim Cole and the federal marshals. A small, inadequate, but deeply symbolic portion was set aside as a restitution fund for the victims of the contract trade, and for the families of the dying whose land had been taken. Boone Sledge, his confession saving him from the noose, had pled guilty. He was serving a sentence of 10 years of hard labor, which, in the Arizona Territory, was a death sentence of its own. But the law was a blunt instrument. It could punish, but it could not heal. The healing was left to the living. In the Santa Fe courthouse, the framed glass negative, the one of Wexler and Sledge, had been taken down. It was too brutal, too raw a reminder of the city's near fall. Judge Cole, in a moment of quiet inspiration, had replaced it. He had commissioned Claire, paying her from the city's discretionary fund for a new photograph, her first official commission. She had returned to that high, windy ridge, the one where she had first seen the chained women, the place where Kai had first seen her. She had set up her new, larger camera, a heavy box bought with the first real money she had ever earned, money from a single, factual article she had sent to the St. Louis Post. She had waited. She did not photograph the town. She did not photograph the railroad. She did not photograph the people. She waited for 3 days, through the heat and the wind, until the light was perfect. She photographed the land itself. She captured a vast, empty landscape of red rock and endless sky, the light hitting the dust devils in the valley below. It was an image of profound, beautiful, and terrifying emptiness, an image of a place that did not care for the ambitions of men. The photograph was printed, large, and hung in the main hall of the courthouse. There was no plaque, there was no explanation. It was just a reminder this land did not belong to Wexler. It did not belong to the railroad. It did not belong to the army. It was only, and always, borrowed by the wind. Claire's life was no longer about the chase. She had found her purpose, and it was not in a St. Louis parlor. It was here. She called it the traveling photo room for justice. It was not a grand studio. It was a sturdy, canvas-covered wagon, funded by a partnership between Dona Marisol and a quiet, deeply contrite Lieutenant Farnham. Claire did not take portraits of wealthy ranchers' wives or their pale, stiff children. She took the wagon into the dine valleys. She took it to the mining camps. She took it to the pueblos. And she did not take their pictures. She taught them. She taught the children, like Ashki Yazzie, now her first apprentice and translator, how to mix the chemicals, how to set the focus, how to work the shutter. You tell your own stories. She told them, a dozen small, curious, brown faces looking up at her, their fingers stained with silver nitrate. No one else has the right to steal your image. You show them who you are. You show them your world. She was giving them the weapon that she knew best. She was teaching them how to arm their own truth. Kai, too, had found a new path. His war was over, but the conflict, the daily fight for survival, remained. The land was still hard, and the men who came to it were still, too often, soft and foolish. He began to train them. He was not a scout for the blue coats. He was a teacher for the people. He took the miners, the men who had once been Wexler's pawns, into the high mesas. He taught them, his voice low and practical, how to find water where there was only rock. He taught them how to read the wind. He taught them how to move through the land without making it, and its people, their enemy. He taught the civilian escorts, the men who now guarded the stagecoaches and the freight wagons, not just how to shoot, but how not to. He taught them how to see, how to de-escalate, how to see the raid before it happened, how to negotiate with a hungry band of Apache or Dine, rather than starting a war that would cost everyone. He was not a warrior, he was a bridge. The seasons turned. The rains of that first year gave way to a blistering summer. The new green life that had sprung up, withered and turned brown. The sky, once again, became an enemy. The storm came in the night, a dry, violent thunderstorm that ripped through the valley. It was not a flood, it was pure wind. Claire and Kai, in their cabin, listened to the roar, a sound like a freight train passing through their walls. They heard a sound that was not the wind, a deep, splintering, tearing crash. When the storm passed and the sun rose, they stepped out. The porch, the wide, beautiful porch they had built with their own hands, was gone. It had been torn clean from the front of the cabin. The heavy pine logs were scattered. The roof splintered and tossed 20 yards away. It was a violation, a personal, vicious insult from the land. Claire stood, her hand over her mouth, her heart sinking. It felt like a failure. Kai looked at the wreckage. He looked at the sky, now calm and pale. He looked at the scattered lumber. He did not curse. He did not sigh. He just nodded. Once. "The wind," he said, his voice quiet. "It still teaches." He turned, went to the shed, and got his tools. He was alone for only 5 minutes. First, his uncle arrived, carrying a hammer. Then, 2 of the miners he had trained, who had been camped nearby, appeared. Then, Doña Marisol, who had been visiting from Santa Fe, arrived. Her face set. Ashki was with her. By noon, there were 20 people at the cabin. The Dini, the miners, the Nuevo Mexicanos. They did not talk. They did not mourn the porch. They worked. They hauled the heavy, scattered logs. They sawed new planks. They raised the splintered roof. It was not a construction. It was a ceremony. A single long afternoon of shared sweat, of grunts and quiet laughter, of a community reasserting itself. By the time the sun began to set, the porch was rebuilt. It was stronger this time. The posts were set deeper. The roof was anchored with iron bolts. Not just nails, the lesson had been learned. The workers had gone, leaving behind the clean smell of sawdust and the warmth of their labor. The sun was setting. It was a true Arizona sunset, an explosion of color so violent it looked like the sky itself was on fire. The clouds were red and orange, and a deep, hot purple, like forged iron, like a new promise. Kai and Claire sat on the new wooden steps of the new porch. They were exhausted. They were covered in sawdust and sweat. Claire leaned against him, her head resting on his good shoulder. His scarred, calloused hand found hers, their fingers lacing together. A comfortable, worn, perfect fit. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the colors deepen and fade, watching the first sharp stars appear in the darkening sky. The land was quiet. The wind, its lesson taught, was just a whisper now, moving through the cottonwoods, moving through the open door of their home. Claire sighed, a sound of profound, weary, and absolute contentment. "We are free," she whispered. It was the simple truth. Freedom was not just being out of a cage. Freedom was the hard-won ability to set your own boundaries, to choose your own vows, to protect the dignity of the people you loved. Justice was not just a verdict in a courtroom. It was the hard, daily, sweaty work of rebuilding a porch, together. Kai turned his head, his rough cheek brushing her hair. She felt it, before she heard it, that low, rumbling sound in his chest. The one she had first heard in the darkness of the canyon. The one she had heard on the coal hill when he was dying. His raspy, quiet, private chuckle. He looked out at the valley. His valley. His home. He looked at the woman beside him, her hair glinting in the twilight. "Now," he whispered, his voice full of a warm, quiet humor, a voice that healed. "Shall we really begin?" The wind moved through the valley of the wind. It was still a knife. It was still a medicine. But they had, at last, learned how to use it. They were healing. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. It means the world to us to connect with you. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And finally, if you want more people to hear this story, please hit that hype button. It helps us more than you know.